All right, Bill's jazzed up here on Your Insurance Corner on 101.5 WLCB.
We will be going on Facebook Live one of these shows so we can have the whole world see what Sean and Bill actually look like and not just what we sound like because, you know, we both have faces for radio.
I can imagine that is going to be met with either a huge gain in listeners or a huge exodus. You know, during the break while we were going over my absolutely terrible production skills, taking a look at the weather outside here in the WLCB broadcast zone, it's going to get wet and windy.
It's going to storm like a banshee here in just a second, ladies and gentlemen. This is Lake County, Illinois. We're under a severe thunderstorm warning, not just a watch, it's a warning. There's lots of red and yellows on this radar. And as I look, there's a lot of rain behind it. Looks like it's going to rain until about 1 o'clock in the morning. But stay tuned. We just went through a battle of stuff a couple weeks ago, and looks like we're going to hear more chainsaws and generators here soon. I hope not, but that could be the possibility. Not just here, but south of us too.
Yeah, I know that in Walworth County in Wisconsin, Kenosha County, McHenry, and Lake County here in Illinois, we all seem to kind of get the same stuff. And I can tell you, last week, was it 2 weeks ago?
I think too.
We had some amazing windstorms to the point where you drive down the street and it looks like people just shook trees.
Yeah, and I think we were broadcasting during a storm. And we didn't hear anything.
We were solid like a rock here at WLCB.
Yeah, we had no idea, and then we go outside, and there was really a whole lot of stuff here, but when I went home, there were branches all over the place, and it was crazy.
Yep.
And my wife was like, did you hear anything? I'm like, no, we're hermetically sealed in, Funkin' Wagnall's porch in the radio station here.
That was a Johnny Carson quote.
Yes, it was.
In a mayonnaise jar under Funkin' Wagnall's porch.
Right. So what's the phone number, Sean?
Phone number is 262-342-6588. All phone lines are open, waiting for your call. I feel like you should be going, timpani or whatever Jerry Lewis used to say during the telethon.
Oh, yeah. I forget what that was.
It would always be like, do it, yes. And he'd be like, yes, sir. And then,
I could get down that low if you want me to. My Barry White impersonation.
He's been going on and on about this. We were talking about this earlier, and I said, I can't. I've got, 2 octaves, maybe a 2.5 octaves, but I'm more of a tenor alto, and he's over there breaking out his Alabama Papa Mau Mau voice, and
Papa Mau Mau.
See, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So just to touch on something for those of you who might not know, Bill also is a closet musician. I've been playing guitar for a long time. I've written about 30 or 40 songs, and I decided to make my musical debut at a open mic place in Antioch. And it actually went pretty well. We had about 15 or 20 people at the site to see me. That was pretty cool. Admittedly, mostly friends, but there was some family. I'm sorry, vice versa, mostly family, but a few friends, and that was very cool. They didn't have to come. Some of them came from a long way to watch. I got very nice reviews, notwithstanding that I still felt I was a little pitchy. We had some issues with sound checks. That was an experience thing on my part that I'll fix over time. But the venue invited me back, so that was cool.
Wow.
And I asked several people after the show, and even up until today, what songs did you like? And there was a song about my dad. There was the last song I did is called Deja Vu. It's a love song that I wrote for my wife Sally at our wedding 30 years ago. I'm in the midst of cutting a CD. And the title of the CD actually comes from my music director at my church, Dale Tippett. I played that Deja Vu song for him, sent it to him on my phone to his phone, and he's riding a bike somewhere downtown Chicago. He stops and calls me and he says, "Dude, that's radio material." And that's the name of my CD. Dude, that's radio material. Yeah.
Awesome.
So stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. That, with a little luck, that might be available by Christmas. We'll see. And we do have a Christmas song that's awesome. in that CD.
He points at me and says, "We have a Christmas song," and I can't carry a tune in a bucket. So you must be doing it.
I'm doing something. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I'm just having fun with this. Although I will say I did spend 3 hours in a recording studio last week for the first time ever. It is a totally different environment when you have that microphone stuck to your nose with really good headphones on. $100 value headphones, not these Kmart Blue Light Specials that we're both wearing.
He brought his own headphones.
Yeah. And the sound difference when you're cutting an album is totally different. The first song I did, 2 takes and we were done. It was okay for what we were doing it for. The next song took 2 hours.
Well, and that's one of those things when you sit behind we have a broadcast console. We call this a mixer or broadcast console, but you sit behind one of those ones in a recording studio and you have 64 to 128 different channels. Mm-hmm. And they're each picking up one microphone, one instrument, one background mic, and you can shape and bend the sound. Yeah. And even with the room, and if your production engineer knows his room, it's incredible what they can get out of it.
My voice was kind of reverbed a little bit on the recording. It was very cool. And I called him the next day after he mixed it and sent it to me. And it was just me and my guitar. There was nothing else. There was no mixing. It was me and my guitar at the same time. And he said, the next time we do this for the CD, you're going to do the guitar first, then you're going to sing. And then I said, well, there's violins that we could throw in here and drums or piano. And he said, we're going to do a track for each part of that.
Multi-track recording, yeah.
And we've got the capability of doing it. So we'll see how it goes. I do have illusions of grandeur. At my age, I just need to have a one-song wonder. I don't care which one. Sean's looking at me like you are delusional. I'm trying to think of
what would be the song that you would do,
Honestly, my Christmas song, I think, has legs. With the right person doing my song, and there's another song I have called Footsteps in the Sand. Mm-hmm. It's based on the poem Footprints, if you're familiar with that one. So I wrote a song, I think that has legs. And Deja Vu definitely has legs, done by the right person. So we'll see. I don't think I'm that right person. I can sing okay, but you put somebody who's got a really naturally gifted voice behind that song. Oh, so we'll see. So with that all in mind, we've digressed a little bit. But if I do perform, I will let you guys know, and you can come and see me. And please come and see me. Friendly faces are appreciated.
I'll be selling tomatoes at the door for
Absolutely.
$2.95 a pound.
Yes. Along with my T-shirts.
Right. I'll be the merch man.
Merch. I have merch, yes. I just learned that word the other day. So PPO, we talked about PPO doctors, in-network, out-of-network. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind that if you go to an out-of-network dentist on purpose, you are basically saying, here's my checkbook, doc. I'm going to sign it. You fill in the number. Because that's what's going to happen.
Essentially, the insurance company is going to pick up what would be their normal and customary payment, and then the doctor, because they're out of network and not contractually liable, can charge you, the patient, the rest.
Whatever they want.
Okay.
Yep, you're at their mercy. And there are certain doctors, especially that are going to be in this space. Chiropractors, and I'm not picking on them, they're just the way it is. Chiropractors are in that space. Social workers and mental health specialists are definitely in this space. And where we run into some problems, not so much in Illinois, but definitely in other states, Indiana being one of them, you have the radiologist, anesthesiologist, pathologist, and ER doctors that you don't have any relationship with. The only time you see them is if you go to the ER or you're about to be put to sleep and the anesthesiologist says, "Good night, Sean," and that's the last time you see them.
Right.
You never see the pathologist because he's in a microscope.
You hope you don't see the pathologist.
Right? And the radiologist, he's in a dark room somewhere.
Right.
So, no offense to any of those doctors. I get it. But that when you're in Illinois, there's laws that if you're going to an in-network hospital and your primary is in-network and your surgeon might be in-network, anybody associated with that claim is necessarily going to be in-network, period, end of statement. Done. It's done. Here's where I would add one additional caveat to my hospital administrator friends. You are giving them privileges to work at your hospital. You've vetted them. You've checked their backgrounds. You've checked their education, their skill level. You want Dr. Sean Hauser to be there. Great. Terrific. We are in a different environment than we were in the 1990s or early 2000s. Even though cost of care was still stupid money back then, it's even worse now. You have, it seems to me, a fiduciary obligation, and I say that word with every bit of meaning I can possibly mean, a fiduciary obligation to say, Dr. Sean, if you're going to work here, I'm going to need you to sign all of these PPO and HMO contracts that we participate in. Now, that's going to affect your pocketbook, Dr. Sean, but we don't want to have a problem with our clientele.
Which usually comes from, I go to the hospital because I believe it's in my network, but then there's a specialist, a pathologist, another ologist that is not in my network who happens to be contracted to that hospital.
Right.
So now I got some stuff in and some stuff out.
And a lot of states don't have the protections that Illinois has. Illinois specifically has some protections. There is, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago with this transparency law, a doctor that might be out of network, and that I would love to see how this is actually going to work in real life. They're going to have to say, Sean, my name's Dr. Bill. I know I'm not in your network. Would you review this piece of paper before I open up your kidneys and sign that and acknowledge the fact that you know I'm not in network? I want to see that in practice. I want to see how that goes. My suspicion is it's not going to go like that. It's going to go, there's a bunch of HIPAA papers and other, billable papers. Would you read this over real quick and sign off everything, blah, 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 blah. Nobody reads.
Meanwhile, your out-of-network anesthetist has already gassed you, so you thought he said hippo, and you're ready to see him. Right, yeah. Yep. No, I agree. I had the same thing when I went to, I was in the hospital a couple years ago. I didn't know who was in and who was out. I knew the hospital, so I knew the nurse that was taking care of me, and I knew that the food and all of that was taken care of, but I didn't see my doctor till the last day.
Right.
I saw a PA on the second to last day, and I saw a nurse's assistant or whatever who was doing all the research every day. Turns out the doctor was in network, but none of the other people were. And it was a quick way to the max payout on my policy.
And here's the other thing too. When I talk about, there's a law in the state that says, you are subject to these rules about balance billing if you're working inside of a network hospital, for example.
Right.
That's true with fully insured. It's not so true if the case is self-funded, because if the case is self-funded, it's not subject to state statutory mandates.
Oh, is this all rolled up under the insurance then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you're self-funded, what I just said, throw that out the window. Those laws may not apply. That's why I say the hospitals, in my professional view, have a fiduciary responsibility to the average Johnny Lunch Bucket that if they bring Dr. Bill and Dr. Sean on, we did all the vetting and we got privileges to participate at Northwestern or Condell or wherever we're going to practice, that the hospital administrator should be having them sign all these networks so that we don't have a problem with our clientele.
Wow.
We know we're taking a haircut, but we need to do that so that we can keep the peace.
If you look up and see Dr. Bill and Dr. Sean,
yeah, we're in trouble.
You're in a cheap hospital.
Yes, you are. Yeah, Shifting Sands Hospital. So now there's HMO doctors. Now in the HMO, remember, the HMO, you have a primary care doctor. He or she drives your care. So generally speaking, you are going to be in network for virtually 100% of your care, no matter who you see, as long as the primary is involved. If there's an emergency situation, whether it's PPO or HMO, and it's truly life-threatening, I define life-threatening as profuse bleeding, chest pains, head trauma, can't breathe, severe abdominal pain, a stomach ache does not count. But if you're bent over in a fetal position on the floor, like having kidney stones like I've had, oh yeah, that'll get somebody's attention. That'll be treated as quote unquote in network.
Okay.
No matter the hospital, generally speaking. Now, let me just add, and oh, by the way there, You go in and you're having chest pains. And they do a bunch of diagnostics and they find out that Sean's heart is perfectly fine. You have reflux, heartburn.
Mm-hmm.
Guess how it gets billed?
Reflux.
Mm-hmm.
And all that other stuff is now, what, unnecessary?
Possibly. It might get denied because you went into the emergency room for a non-emergency situation. There are now contract provisions that talk about non-emergency visits to an emergency room. Non-emergency. There is a workaround, and the workaround is there are notes on the case. Sean came in with chest pains. So once the notes are seen by the insurance company, it'll get itself fixed. And I'm telling you, it happens, and it happens every day.
No, I know. I went to Condell one time because I thought I was having chest pains, and it wasn't. But they couldn't tell me what it was, but based on the enzymes and everything else, and it wasn't acid reflux or anything like that. But they did the whole workup, and
Yep. So, and then the last one is indemnity, which doesn't exist very much, but they're still out there. Indemnity basically uses no network. You can go any doctor you want to, and they pay a reasonable customary fee. Here's what they actually pay. One of the indemnity plans that are out there is, sorry, somebody just sent me a text message. Sorry, shouldn't have laughed at that, but I'll comment on that in a second. Some of these self-funded plans use what's called reference-based pricing models.
Boy, doesn't that sound like a...
It's Medicare Plus, basically.
Yeah.
They take the Medicare and pay 150, 125, or 200% of the Medicare rate. You're getting 200%. You're going to be okay. You're getting 125% of the Medicare rate as a provider. Keep in mind, you're not in net. There's no network. There's no contract, right, with the doctor. You're going, hey, wait a minute.
Sounds like that doctor's in for a bonanza of payment.
Okay.
Right.
These contracts exist, and they generally do work, but you get some providers that they get their shorts in a knot. And if that contract is in place, there is a contract provision with the employer and the insurance company where it basically says, if you have a problem where you're getting balance billed in these environments, again, there's no network, and the doctor's trying to balance bill you a couple $100 more because the insurance company only paid $125. The patient is to call the insurance company, and they are to step in front of the patient and negotiate with the doctor as to what do you want? How do we make this thing go away? The patient never gets billed for that difference. He is protected contractually by the insurance contract that was signed by the employer and the insurance company. The excess claim in the self-funded world would go to the employer liability. It just gets absorbed in that, which is fair because it was out of the control of the employee. Certainly the doctor's not subject to any contract, so they can realistically charge whatever the heck they want to. Mm-hmm. But we still have some doctors going, I'm not even going to honor your card. Which then raises a question about the Hippocratic Oath versus the Hippocratic Oath.
Well, so they're saying they're not going to honor your card because they're concerned that they're going to get only
25% above Medicare.
25% above Medicare.
Yep.
So they say they won't take your card.
Mm-hmm.
But in the case of... So it's really the doctor that's on the short end because the patient themselves, they're going to pay what they're going to pay.
Right.
And then their employer's bearing the risk of anything over and above than what the employee pays or the policy owner.
That's correct.
And so why are they worried about not getting paid? Because aren't they just going to bill the balance?
Because they don't understand the dynamics of what's going on.
Gotcha.
So and there are some cards that we've just learned about that says either on the back or the front, and this is where it gets dicey, accept assumed assignment. The insurance company puts that little code word in these cards, which is code for if you take our card, and it says assumed assignment, you can't come at us for the excess. Well, that's wrong too, because that's a weasel clause on an ID card that's done by the insurance company legal people to do a workaround so that the doctor can't, go back and charge the extra couple $100 that they were looking for. So what we're seeing there.
But then that doctor is going to charge the employer.
No, he's going to try to balance bill the patient. The insurance company is ultimately going to try to step in front.
So he'll balance bill the patient, and then
the patient's supposed to call the insurance company and say, "Hey, doctor's balance billing me. Step in front of me." Insurance company, you have an obligation to step in front of me. And then the insurance company, with this phraseology on this ID card, they would call the doctor and say, "Sean, that ID card said assumed assignment. We assume that by you taking that card, you assumed whatever we were going to pay, you were good with it. And so there's nothing for us to talk about."
Interesting.
So the doctors are now going, if we see that phraseology on the ID card, we don't want anything to do with that insurance company, period. Now the patient has nothing.
Okay.
It doesn't
So
happen
your choice is to go to another provider if possible. Then,
So I know one insurance company rep said to me one time, "Well, tell them to go find another doctor." And I said, "It's not that simple. You don't have a network that says who accepts the reference-based pricing. And if you call any of these doctors, they're not going to go know what the heck you're talking about." So, and I said, secondly, this particular person has 14-year relationship with this doctor who's doing this. So in this particular case, I'm going to use this as an example. We're going to follow up with this next week. We're going to talk about more about the claims and how to fight claims and all that.
Okay.
But this particular thing did happen with 5 minutes left. We have a client in this reference-based pricing model. I won't bring up who the hospital is. Let's just say it's north of the Cheddar Curtain, or north of the it's in
Cheddar
the
Curtain.
it's behind the Cheddar Curtain. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Okay. Somewhere up there. And the hospital said, "We're not taking the card." The clerk did. They just not taking it.
Because they didn't understand
They didn't understand what they were looking at. And it did not have that phrase. Did not have that
then
phrase.
they could, in theory,
They could have played "Let's make a deal" with the insurance
or
company.
balance bill the patient.
And then they'd still play "Let's make a deal" and, "Hey, what do you want? What do we have to do to make this go away?"
Right.
Theoretically, it's all the way up to, well, we want $250, we want our $250. That's what.
Right.
And ultimately, some cases they would write the check and then ding the employer contract for it. I got involved because this was a 14-year relationship. The patient actually had knowledge of coding. We didn't talk about coding it. We're going to talk about coding, diagnostic codes, CPT codes. She had knowledge of coding. And she said, "Bill, I know this is a game, but it really irritates me. I got a 14-year relationship with this doctor. I can't just pick up and leave."
Right.
So I wrote a letter to the CEO of that hospital system and the chief financial officer of the hospital system. They pointed me to the contract administrator, and I had a very pleasant conversation. And it started out with our clerk made a mistake. That card is okay. I said, "Oh. Okay, great. So that really isn't anything for us to talk about." And he said, "No, but I do want to add some things." And that's when he told me about this little phrase. He's the one who told me about this phrase on the card. And I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting. Well, I appreciate that." I said, "Would you be willing to come on my radio show and talk about this?" He said, "No."
Of course not.
But we were able to handle it because the one thing I did, and this does work, the CEO and the chief financial officer do not want press problems. There's already enough problems in the hospital systems, whether they're non-for-profit or for-profit. There's already enough problems. They don't want the little things to become a big nuclear warhead. They immediately dealt with it. They pointed me to the contract manager. We had a conversation. We were able to make it go away. So as an example, with about 2 minutes left here, when you're fighting a claim, there's a certain process that I go through, which we're going to illustrate in detail next week. But at the end of the day, if you don't feel like you're getting anywhere, I absolutely go to the chief executive officer of that hospital system. I don't bother with the head of contracting or the head of claims. I go right to the horse's mouth, right to the top, because they know that somebody's really PO'd.
It's interesting, though, that also exists in a lot of other industries. Like, for instance, banking. If you file what they call an executive complaint, there's parameters where they need to respond or their regulators get all over them.
Yep.
And they will audit them on those procedures.
And that's the other thing, too, is that we will also write letters in certain circumstances, not against the provider. We'll send a letter to the Department of Insurance, a complaint letter. To your point, no CEO of an insurance company wants to hear that there's a letter of complaint at the DOI. That
exactly,
is red
because
flags.
It's opening a door.
Yeah,
right.
It's red flags. And I'll be the first one to tell you, I'm a broker that is a client's broker. I will go fight for you for whatever you need to do, and I will generally get my way. Generally speaking, I don't lose very often. With that in mind, it's the top of the hour. There's a fast 2 hours. Sean, thanks for coming out in this stormy night. My name is Bill Miksch, president of WDMA Financial Group. That's Sean Hauser. This is 101.5 WLCB Slades Corner, Wisconsin. You guys have a safe weekend, and we'll see you next Tuesday. We'll talk about more claims. Have a great night, everyone.